I never thought living in a quiet neighborhood would turn into something so intense, something straight out of a movie. My wife and I moved here hoping for peace and a bit of calm. But what happened next completely flipped everything upside down. It started with the HOA. Yeah, the Homeowners Association, who acted like they were in charge of more than just neighborhood rules. One day, an HOA officer actually pulled a gun on my wife. It sounds unbelievable, but it happened. The tension was thick, and honestly, I still can't wrap my head around how quickly things escalated. What makes this even crazier is that the HOA guy had no idea who he was dealing with. My wife isn't just anyone, she's an active Delta Force operator, trained for situations way beyond a neighborhood dispute. The look on his face when he realized who she really was. That moment changed everything. It was like the entire dynamic shifted in an instant, and suddenly, the neighborhood drama turned into something much bigger. This story isn't just about a scary confrontation. It's about how people judge situations without knowing the full picture, and how the unexpected can happen when you least expect it. You'll hear about the moments leading up to that shocking incident, the reasons behind the HOA's overreach, and how my wife's background played a key role in handling what could have been a disaster. But this is just the beginning. There's more to the story, more tension, more surprises. The real question is, what happens next? How does a quiet neighborhood turn into a battlefield? Stick around, because the next part will reveal the truth behind that day and why it changed everything for us. Before all this chaos, our neighborhood seemed pretty normal: quiet streets, friendly faces, and the usual HOA emails about lawn care or parking rules. But over time, things started to change. The HOA board became stricter, more aggressive, and some of the members took it upon themselves to enforce rules in ways that felt more like intimidation than community care. We'd hear stories about neighbors getting warned over small things, but none of it felt threatening until the day they came to our door. My wife had just gotten back from a deployment, still wearing some of her gear when the HOA police showed up. Honestly, we didn't expect anything serious, just another complaint or warning. But the way the situation unfolded was far from ordinary. The guy wasn't just there to talk. He had this intense attitude, and before we could even understand what was going on, he pulled out a gun. It felt like a nightmare, the kind you never imagine will happen in your own home. What the HOA didn't realize was that my wife's training isn't just about physical strength. It's about control, quick thinking, and knowing how to handle pressure. She stayed calm, even when things were at their worst. That calmness came from years in some of the most dangerous places in the world. But at that moment, it wasn't just about her skills, it was about protecting our family and standing up to an unexpected threat right on our doorstep. The HOA's actions raised a lot of questions. Were they really authorized to act like this? What had triggered such an extreme reaction? And how far were they willing to go? We started digging into what was behind this growing tension in the neighborhood, and what we uncovered wasn't what we expected. The deeper we went, the clearer it became that this was about more than just rules and regulations. Something bigger was at play, and we were right in the middle of it. After that intense moment with the HOA police pulling a gun, things didn't just settle down, they spiraled. The tension in the neighborhood grew thicker, and suddenly, everyone seemed to be picking sides. Some neighbors supported the HOA, believing they were just trying to keep order. Others were shocked and scared, wondering if what happened to us could happen to them next. The peaceful community we once knew was now divided. And that division brought a new kind of conflict, one that wasn't just about rules, but about trust and fear. On one hand, the HOA claimed they were only doing their job, trying to enforce the community guidelines that everyone agreed to when they moved in. But their methods felt heavy-handed, almost like they were acting as their own police force. The idea of HOA officers carrying weapons and confronting residents with that kind of aggression didn't sit right with many of us. We started asking questions. Who gave them the authority? Were there proper checks and balances? Or was this a power trip that went way too far? Meanwhile, my wife's background kept coming up in conversations around the neighborhood. People were surprised to learn she was still active in Delta Force. Some admired her. Others seemed intimidated. It shifted the whole dynamic because suddenly, this wasn't just a neighborhood squabble. It felt like a clash of worlds. There were whispers about whether the HOA was prepared for someone like her. The reality was, none of us were. But beneath the surface, there was more going on. Old grudges, power struggles within the HOA board, and personal agendas started surfacing. Some members were using the situation to push their own ideas of control, while others feared what might happen if things escalated further. At the same time, my wife and I had to figure out how to protect ourselves and our family without making the neighborhood feel like a war zone. It was a delicate balance, one that kept the tension high and the outcome uncertain. The story wasn't just about a gun pulled on my wife anymore. It was about the hidden battles in our community, the unexpected consequences of unchecked authority, and how ordinary people cope when the line between neighbor and adversary starts to blur. And as we dug deeper, we realized this was just the beginning of something much bigger. After that day, everything changed. We couldn't even take a walk without catching sideways glances or awkward silence from neighbors who once waved and smiled. The HOA board kept their distance too, but they were definitely watching. A few days later, we found a warning letter taped to our front door, no envelope. No signature, just a typed note accusing us of escalating tensions and disrespecting community authority. It didn't mention the incident directly, but we knew exactly what it was about, and that only made it worse. My wife kept things calm on the outside, but I knew she was on high alert. She started checking the security cameras twice a day, watching for patterns, cars that didn't belong, people walking by a little too slowly. She said something didn't feel right, and when she says that, I listen. She's not paranoid. She's trained to see signs most people miss. And sure enough, we started noticing strange things. Our trash bins were being moved. A small drone buzzed past our upstairs window one night. Even the gate keypad looked like it had been tampered with. That's when she started digging. Quietly. Carefully, she gathered details about the HOA board, who was behind the power grab, who had a past in private security, and who might have ties to local enforcement. The deeper she went, the clearer it became this wasn't just about lawn violations or fence heights. Some of these HOA members were treating this neighborhood like their personal territory. One name kept coming up. A guy who ran for HOA president 3 times before finally winning. He'd built his little network from behind closed doors, and the man who pulled the weapon on my wife. He wasn't acting alone. Then, late one night, we got a knock. Not a casual knock, either firm, deliberate, middle of the night. My wife reached for the same calm focus she always had in the field. She signaled me to stay back. Whoever was on the other side of that door didn't come to talk about recycling bins. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't about the HOA anymore. It was something deeper, something planned. The next move could change everything. She opened the door, just a crack, barely enough to see who it was. Standing there wasn't a uniformed officer or an HOA member, was our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Langston. She was shaking, clutching something in her hand. She'd always been polite, kept to herself, maybe a little nervous around most people. But tonight, she looked terrified. My wife stepped outside with her, kept her voice low. Calm, Mrs. Langston handed her a small flash drive and whispered, "I shouldn't be giving you this, but I saw what they've been doing. You need to see it before it's too late." We didn't ask questions right then. My wife just nodded, slipped it into her pocket, and brought her inside before anyone else could see. Once we locked the doors, we plugged the drive into an old laptop we don't connect to Wi-Fi just in case. What we found made our stomachs turn. Hidden camera footage, time-stamped logs, even notes referencing certain houses, including ours. It wasn't just HOA surveillance, it was targeted, organized, and went way beyond any neighborhood business. The man who pulled the gun. He'd been logging interactions with other residents too. Notes like observe behavior, check for outside contacts, and confirm ties. But the real twist came when we scrolled further down and saw a folder labeled simply Phase 2. Inside were internal messages about a vote to give certain board members authority to enforce emergency rules. If there was a community threat, no oversight, no limits, and they'd already marked families to monitor first. Ours was right at the top. My wife looked up from the screen, jaw tight. "They're not watching just us," she said. "They're preparing for something." Whatever this was, it wasn't just about a power-hungry HOA. Someone had a plan, and we were already caught in it. The knock at the door hadn't been the beginning, it had been the warning. And we were running out of time to figure out what was coming next. The next morning, my wife was already up before sunrise. Dressed in plain clothes, but with that quiet focus I'd seen only during her deployments. We knew we couldn't go to the police, not yet. Some of the messages on that flash drive suggested certain local officials were either involved or deliberately turning a blind eye. So, she took another route. She reached out to an old contact, someone from her unit who owed her a favor. No details, no names, just a location, a time, and a quiet ask. Bring eyes. That evening, the HOA board called an emergency meeting in the community center. The message was vague, but word had spread fast. A new security protocol was being voted on, something about maintaining safety after recent disruptions. The room was packed. Most of the residents looked confused. A few of the board members looked far too comfortable. My wife and I sat near the back, watching. She had the flash drive in her jacket pocket and the laptop fully charged and loaded, ready for a live screen share. Just as the president of the HOA stood to speak, the projector behind him flickered on. Not their slides, ours. My wife calmly walked up, plugged the laptop into the projector, and let the footage play. The surveillance logs, the board's secret meetings, the Phase 2 plans. Gasps filled the room. Phones came out. Whispers turned into outrage. And that's when it happened. One of the board members bolted toward the exit, pushing through the crowd. But before he could make it out the door, two plainclothes men stepped in his path. Quietly, firmly, they identified themselves and escorted him outside. My wife just watched it all unfold with barely a word. It was over. The neighborhood finally saw what had been going on under their noses. The board was suspended, pending investigation, and emergency oversight was brought in. But here's the twist no one saw coming when we got home. There was another letter on our doorstep, handwritten. No threats this time, just a single line. You stopped Phase 2, but you never saw Phase 3. My wife looked at me, her expression unreadable. We're not done yet, she said. We kept that final letter locked away for days, unsure what it really meant. My wife was already piecing together loose ends, going back through the flash drive, rechecking footage, and matching names to old community records. It turned out Phase 3 was mostly bluff plans, scribbled down but never acted on. A scare tactic meant to protect the people who had the most to lose. Still, it reminded us how deep this all went. Power, when left unchecked, has a strange way of turning ordinary people into something else. Within 2 weeks, the HOA board was fully dissolved. A new temporary leadership team was brought in, made up of longtime residents who actually cared about rebuilding trust. The man who pulled the gun, he was quietly taken into custody and will be facing charges. The footage had done more than expose a power grab. It gave neighbors the clarity they needed to take back control of their own community. People we hadn't spoken to in months were now waving again. Some even came over just to say thank you, Mrs. Langston, the quiet neighbor who risked everything by handing over that flash drive, ended up joining the new board. My wife personally helped install security systems on her home. They talk often now, usually about gardening or neighborhood watch, nothing heavy. Life slowly returned to normal, or, at least, a better version of it. This whole thing started as a bizarre HOA power play, but it became something bigger. A story about standing your ground, choosing courage over fear, and remembering that even in quiet neighborhoods, the truth can be louder than any threat. We never expected this battle, but we faced it. And in the end, it reminded us, real peace isn't just about silence. It's about knowing someone's got your back when things get loud.